All right, so are you ready to like really level up your English fluency? You want to sound less like a textbook and more like you're just, chilling at a cafe or a pub, chatting with friends.
Hmm.
Well, then you've definitely come to the right place.
Right.
Today, we are diving deep into 21 ways to speak English. More like a native.
Yes.
And I'm already fascinated by some of these surprising things I'm learning. Just like flipping through it,
Yeah.
I'm seeing tips that go way beyond your typical grammar rules.
It's true. Fluency isn't just about knowing the right words.
Right.
It's about using them in a way that sounds natural and effortless.
Okay.
And that involves understanding the subtle cues and cultural nuances that shape how native speakers actually communicate.
Okay, let's unpack this. First up, greetings.
Okay.
I have to admit, I'm a bit stuck in a rut. I feel like I always just default to, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
But this guide is suggesting that native speakers rarely use that.
You're right, they don't. Yeah, it's considered a bit too formal for most everyday interactions.
Okay.
Instead, you'll hear things like, hey, how's it going? Or, all right. It's about creating that sense of familiarity and casualness.
That makes sense. Like you're signaling that you're on the same wavelength. But I'm curious,
Yeah.
why do native speakers prefer these more informal greetings? What message are they trying to convey?
Well, it's all about establishing rapport.
Okay.
Informal greetings create a sense of camaraderie, like you're part of the same tribe. It's like you're saying, we're in this together.
I'm starting to see how much thought goes into even the simplest exchanges.
Right.
And this guide gives so many creative alternatives like, hi, what's up? How's life?
Mm-hmm.
I'm already feeling more confident about breaking out of my greeting rut.
That's great. And it's not just about memorizing phrases.
Right.
It's about understanding the subtle ways they're used in different contexts.
Okay.
For instance, in British English, you all right
Right.
is a common greeting, even if the person looks perfectly fine.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I can see how that could easily be misinterpreted by someone from a different culture.
Right.
So it's really about picking up on those cultural cues and adapting our language accordingly.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm ready for the next level. Let's talk about advice and suggestions.
Okay.
This is where I tend to get a bit bossy, I think. I
Yeah.
rely too much on should and must. Like I'm laying down the law,
Yeah.
But this guide suggests using gentler phrases like, how about, or it might be worth.
You've hit on a key point.
Okay.
Should and must can sound quite forceful,
Yeah.
almost like you're giving an order.
Right.
These softer alternatives create a more collaborative and respectful tone.
Okay.
You're offering suggestions rather than dictating actions.
I never thought about it that way, but it makes so much sense. It's like you're inviting the person to consider your perspective rather than imposing it on them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's these subtle shifts in language that can have a huge impact on how our message is received.
Okay, let's dive into something that really caught my eye.
Okay.
What? Statements.
Okay.
Apparently, these are all about expressing strong emotions in a way that really packs a punch.
You're right. They add a level of intensity and drama that you don't get with a simple statement. Think about the difference between saying, it's a beautiful day, and what a beautiful day. The second one just has more oomph.
I am seeing that.
Yeah.
And it's not just about positive emotions, right?
Right.
You can use, statements to express surprise, disappointment, even anger.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Imagine spilling your coffee all over your new shirt.
Oh.
You might say, what a disaster, or even, what a mess.
Yeah.
It's a way of venting your frustration and emphasizing the intensity of the situation.
I can hear the difference. It's like you're not just stating a fact.
Right.
You're sharing your emotional reaction to it.
Precisely. And that's what makes these statements so powerful. They add a layer of authenticity and immediacy to our language.
But I'm guessing there's more to it than just the words themselves, right? How you say it must also play a big role.
You're absolutely right. Intonation is crucial.
Okay.
The way you emphasize certain words and the overall tone of your voice can completely change the meaning of what statement.
Right.
A sarcastic, what a great idea,
Yeah.
sounds very different from a genuine one.
This is making me realize how much I rely on flat, emotionless statements. Time to inject some feeling into my English. Okay, let's tackle something I sometimes struggle with.
Okay.
Statements.
Okay.
I find myself overusing I am constructions,
Yeah.
especially when I'm trying to express feelings and it ends up sounding so clunky and unnatural.
It's a common pitfall for language learners.
Really?
But native speakers often opt for simpler constructions.
Okay.
Like it's nice to see you, rather than I am happy to see you.
Right. It's so much more concise and elegant.
Yes.
But I'm curious, why do native speakers prefer these it statements? Is it just about efficiency?
It's partly about efficiency, but it's also about creating a more objective tone. By using it, you're shifting the focus away from your personal feelings and onto the situation itself. It's a subtle way of sounding more matter-of-fact and less emotionally invested.
Ah, I see. So it's not that native speakers are trying to hide their feelings. They're just expressing them in a more understated way.
Exactly. And this guide highlights how versatile these it statements can be.
Okay.
You can use them in different tenses and moods, like, it was great to see you, or it would be lovely to meet up again.
This is opening up a whole new world of possibilities.
Right.
It's like I've been given a secret code to unlock more natural-sounding English.
And that's the key, isn't it? It's about cracking the code and understanding the underlying patterns that govern how native speakers use the language.
Okay, I'm ready to delve into something that I think a lot of us struggle with.
Okay.
Giving criticism without sounding too harsh. This guide calls them softeners, and I'm all ears.
Softeners are like linguistic shock absorbers. They allow us to express our opinions, especially negative ones,
Right.
without coming across as too blunt or judgmental.
The guide mentions words like kind of, sort of, and a bit. I can see how those could take the edge off a critical remark.
Yes.
Like instead of saying the food was terrible, you could say the food was kind of bland.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It softens the blow while still conveying your message.
Right.
And it's especially important in cross-cultural communication.
Yeah.
Directness is perceived differently in various cultures, and softeners can help us avoid misunderstandings.
So true. I've definitely had moments where my directness has been misconstrued as rudeness. So using these softeners is really about showing respect for the other person's perspective.
You've got it. It's about finding that balance between honesty and sensitivity.
Yeah. Okay, I'm ready to move on to something that's always puzzled me.
Okay.
Tag questions.
Tag questions.
I know they're those little additions at the end of sentences.
Right.
Like, isn't it? Or, right. But I've never quite understood their purpose.
They're more versatile than they seem.
Okay.
They can be used to check understanding, invite agreement, or simply keep the conversation flowing. For instance, you might say, "It's a lovely day, isn't it?" Not necessarily expecting a detailed response,
Right.
but rather a confirmation that the other person is engaged.
Ah, I see. It's like you're throwing the conversational ball back into their court, inviting them to participate. But I'm curious, are tag questions used differently in different varieties of English?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes.
Really?
For example, in British English, you're more likely to hear, "isn't it?" while Americans might use right or huh.
That's fascinating. So even within the English-speaking world, there are subtle variations in how tag questions are used.
Right.
I'm starting to appreciate how much depth and complexity there is to spoken language.
It's like a vast and ever-evolving tapestry.
Yeah.
And the more we explore it, the more we discover its richness and beauty.
All right, I'm ready to tackle another tip that seems counterintuitive.
Okay.
Shortening questions.
Shortening questions.
This guide suggests dropping words like are you, do you, or have you in informal settings.
It might feel strange at first,
Yeah.
but it's incredibly common in spoken English.
Okay.
Native speakers often streamline their language to make it more efficient.
So instead of saying, are you coming to the party?
Yes.
You might just say, coming to the party.
Exactly.
Oh,
Or
gotcha.
instead of, did you see the game last night?
Mm-hmm.
You could say, see the game last night.
Hmm.
It creates a more relaxed and conversational tone.
I can hear how that sounds more natural.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there are situations where these shortened questions might not be appropriate.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's all about choosing the right register for the situation.
Okay.
In a formal setting, like a job interview or a presentation,
Right.
it's best to stick to the grammatically complete forms.
That makes sense. It's
Yeah.
like wearing the right outfit for the occasion. You wouldn't wear a tuxedo to a picnic.
Right.
And you wouldn't use slang in a business meeting.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's all about adapting our language to fit the social context.
Okay, I'm intrigued by this next tip.
Yeah.
Using so-then questions.
Right questions. Okay.
I have never consciously noticed this before, but the guide suggests that it's a subtle way to make questions sound softer and less intrusive.
You're right.
Okay.
It's a way of easing into a question.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like you're giving the person a heads up that you're about to ask for information.
So instead of saying, what did you do last weekend? You would say, so did you do anything nice last weekend then?
Precisely.
Okay.
It adds a bit of warmth and approachability to your questions. You're not demanding information. You're inviting the person to share their experiences.
I can see how that would make the other person feel more at ease. It's like you're saying, I'm genuinely interested in hearing about your weekend, not just trying to pry.
That's exactly the impression it creates. It's all about those subtle cues that shape the tone and flow of a conversation.
This is making me realize how much goes on beneath the surface of language.
Right.
It's like there's a whole secret world of meaning that we're only just beginning to explore.
And that's what makes language learning so fascinating. It's a constant journey of discovery.
All right, I'm ready to tackle something that seems completely counterintuitive.
Okay.
Ditching yes and no. I have to admit this one threw me for a loop.
It seems strange, doesn't it?
It does.
But in spoken English, native speakers rarely rely on those simple one-word answers. They tend to provide more elaborate responses to show their engagement and provide context.
So instead of just saying yes to, do you have change, you might say sure or of course.
Exactly.
Right.
Or if someone asks, is this the right way? Instead of just saying no, you could say, I don't think so. Maybe try that road over there.
I can see how those more elaborate responses add more depth and personality to the conversation.
It's like you're not just answering the question.
Right.
You're also showing that you're paying attention and willing to help.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
It's all about those little extras that convey politeness
Yeah.
and a willingness to engage.
Okay. I'm starting to see how all these tips are interconnected. It's not just about individual words or phrases.
Right.
It's about creating a whole conversational style that feels natural and engaging.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
It's about weaving those individual threads into a cohesive tapestry of fluent and authentic English.
I'm ready to dive into a topic that's essential for fluency, but often overlooked.
Okay.
Contractions.
Contractions.
I know I use some, like I'm and don't. But this guide suggests using even more to sound more natural.
You're on the right track.
Okay.
Contractions are a hallmark of fluent, natural-sounding English.
Okay.
They streamline our speech and make it flow more smoothly.
So instead of saying London is a beautiful city, I should say London's a beautiful city.
Exactly. Okay.
Or instead of he has been working hard, you would say he's been working hard.
I can hear how that makes a difference.
Yeah.
It's like the words are gliding together instead of bumping into each other.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the more we use contractions, the more natural they will feel.
I'm realizing I have a lot of room for improvement in this area. I tend to over-enunciate, especially when I'm nervous.
That's perfectly normal.
Okay.
It just takes practice to get comfortable with those shortened forms.
Okay, let's talk about some contractions that I use sparingly.
Okay.
Because I'm always worried about sounding too informal. Gonna, wanna, and gotta.
It's wise to be mindful of the context.
Okay.
While these contractions are incredibly common in casual conversations, they might not be appropriate for all situations.
So I probably shouldn't use them in a job interview or when giving a presentation?
Probably not.
Okay.
But in casual settings, like chatting with friends or family, they can help you sound more relaxed and natural.
The guide gives examples like, I'm going to grab some coffee, or I want to watch a movie. It definitely makes the language feel more conversational.
And remember, it's all about finding that sweet spot between naturalness and appropriateness.
Okay.
You want to sound fluent, but not careless.
Right. It's about being aware of the social cues and adjusting our language accordingly.
Exactly. It's like being a linguistic chameleon, blending seamlessly into different conversational environments.
All right, let's tackle something that I think a lot of language learners struggle with. Pronouns.
Pronouns, okay.
I know I'm guilty of repeating nouns too much, which makes my English sound clunky and repetitive.
It's a common tendency,
Right.
especially when you're focusing on getting your message across accurately. But native speakers use pronouns strategically
Okay.
to avoid repetition and make their speech flow more smoothly.
So instead of saying, John went to the store and John bought some milk, I should say John went to the store and he bought some milk.
Exactly. Or the book was on the table and I picked up the book becomes the book was on the table and I picked it up.
I can hear the difference. Using pronouns makes the sentences sound so much more natural and elegant. But I'm guessing there's a fine line between using pronouns effectively and creating confusion, right?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
The guide emphasizes the importance of clear pronoun reference.
Right.
If it's not clear who or what the pronoun refers to,
Right.
it can lead to misunderstandings.
So it's about finding that balance between concision and clarity.
Yeah.
We want to avoid repetition, but not at the expense of being understood.
Exactly. It's all about using pronouns strategically and thoughtfully.
Okay, let's dive into something that seems particularly tricky. Shortening past modals.
Shortening past modals.
This guide suggests that native speakers often use shortened forms of past modals, like should have and could have, in casual conversations.
You're right. It's one of those areas where spoken English diverges from written English. You'll hear things like shoulda, coulda, and woulda all the time in everyday conversations.
So instead of saying, I should have studied harder, people might say, I should have studied harder.
Precisely.
Okay.
Or, I could have gone to the party becomes, I could have gone to the party. It reflects the natural rhythm and speed of spoken English.
But I'm curious, are there specific pronunciations for these shortened forms? I mean, do they sound exactly like shoulda and coulda?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And yes, they do have distinct pronunciations. The have part often gets reduced to a schwa sound,
Okay.
almost like
Okay.
So shoulda sounds more like shoulda, and coulda sounds more like coulda.
That's interesting. So it's not just about shortening the words. It's about adjusting the pronunciation as well. I'm starting to see how much attention to detail goes into sounding truly native-like.
It's all about those subtle nuances that often go unnoticed,
Right.
but make a big difference in how we're perceived.
Okay, let's tackle a topic that often gets a bad rap. Filler words.
Filler words, okay?
I've always tried to avoid using these, thinking they make me sound hesitant or unprepared. But this guide suggests that they're actually an important part of natural speech.
You're right.
Okay.
Fillers and, serve a purpose. They help us smooth out pauses
Okay.
and give us time to think, while signaling that we haven't finished our thought.
So it's not necessarily bad to use them.
Not at all.
Really?
The key is to use them sparingly and appropriately.
Okay.
Excessive filler words can be distracting, but a few well-placed fillers can actually make you sound more natural and approachable.
The guide contrasts sentences with appropriate filler usage to those with excessive fillers. I was just wondering if you wanted to, grab lunch. Sounds much better than I was thinking about maybe getting lunch.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about finding that balance.
Right.
You want to sound thoughtful, but not hesitant or unsure of yourself.
Yeah. So it's not about eliminating fillers altogether. It's about using them strategically to enhance our communication.
Right.
I'm starting to see how even these seemingly insignificant words can play a role in how we're perceived.
It's all about those subtle cues that shape the flow and tone of our speech.
Yeah.
They might seem small, but they can have a big impact.
All right, let's move on to something that I'm a bit unsure about.
Okay.
Sentence finishers.
Sentence finishers.
This guide mentions phrases like and stuff or something as ways to end sentences casually. But I'm always hesitant to use these because I worry about sounding too informal.
You're right to be mindful of the context.
Okay.
Sentence finishers are definitely more appropriate for casual conversations than formal settings.
Right.
But in the right situation, they can add a touch of informality and create a more relaxed tone.
So it's all about matching our language to the social situation.
Exactly.
It's like wearing the right clothes for the occasion.
Okay, I'm ready to tackle something that's essential for clear communication, but often challenging for language learners. Linking words.
Linking words.
I know these are important for connecting ideas, but I sometimes struggle with using them effectively.
Linking words are like the glue that holds our sentences and paragraphs together. They help us transition between thoughts and make our explanations more coherent.
And there are so many to choose from.
Right.
The guide mentions and, but,
Nice.
so then, and that's why. That's just a few examples.
The key is to use a variety of linking words.
Okay.
To avoid sounding repetitive.
Right.
And to choose the right linker for the relationship you want to convey between ideas.
So instead of just saying, I went to the store, I bought some milk,
I could say, I went to the store and I bought some milk, or I went to the store because I needed milk.
Exactly.
Oh.
Those little words make a big difference in the clarity and flow of our speech.
I'm starting to see how even the smallest words can play a powerful role in shaping our communication.
It's all about those subtle nuances that often go unnoticed,
Mm.
but contribute to fluency and clarity.
Okay, I'm ready to tackle something that seems a bit daunting.
Okay.
Noun phrases.
Noun phrases.
I tend to stick to simpler sentence structures.
Mm.
But this guide suggests using noun phrases to sound more sophisticated and natural.
Noun phrases are a great way to pack more information into a sentence
Mm.
without making it sound overly complex.
Okay.
They allow us to combine multiple words into a single unit that functions as a noun.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Can you give me an example?
Sure.
Okay.
Instead of saying, I enjoy hiking, do you enjoy hiking too?
Hmm.
You could say, hiking is enjoyable, isn't it?
Hmm.
You've taken the verb hiking and turned it into a noun phrase, hiking,
Okay.
which then becomes the subject of the sentence.
I see. That's a much more elegant way to express the same idea. It's like condensing the information without losing any of the meaning.
Exactly.
Wow.
And the guide also mentions using it phrases to change the clause order. Like, it's fun, isn't it, going to the beach? Instead of going to the beach is fun. Do you think so?
It's amazing how much we can do with just a few tweaks to sentence structure.
Right.
I'm starting to see how noun phrases can add variety and sophistication to our spoken English.
It's all about expanding our linguistic toolkit
Right.
and having more options at our disposal.
Okay, I'm ready for something a bit more fun. Exaggeration.
Exaggeration, okay.
This guide encourages us to embrace the art of exaggeration as a way of adding emphasis and humor to our language.
You're right.
Okay.
Exaggeration is a staple of spoken English. It's a way of adding color and drama to our stories and opinions.
And the guide emphasizes that native speakers aren't afraid to use strong adjectives and adverbs.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of saying, the food was bad, you might hear someone say, the food was absolutely revolting.
Yeah.
Or instead of, the movie was good, you might hear, the movie was absolutely incredible.
I can see how those exaggerated expressions add a level of intensity and humor. It's like you're painting a more vivid picture with your words.
You've got it.
Yeah.
But it's important to use exaggeration strategically.
Right.
Overusing it can make you sound insincere or even childish.
So it's about finding that balance between being expressive and maintaining credibility. I guess it's like any form of humor. A little goes a long way.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
It's all about using exaggeration judiciously for maximum effect.
Okay, I'm ready to tackle something that seems a bit risky. Repeating adverbs for emphasis.
Okay.
I have a feeling this could easily go wrong.
It's true.
Yeah.
Repeating adverbs can sound repetitive if overused. Right.
But when used effectively, they can intensify the meaning of our statements and add emotional weight.
So instead of saying, I'm very tired, I could say, I'm very, very tired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or instead of, I'm really sorry, you could say, I'm really, really sorry. It emphasizes the sincerity of your apology.
I can see how repeating adverbs can add a layer of intensity and emotion. But I'm curious, are there any specific adverbs that lend themselves to this technique?
You're right to ask.
Okay.
Not all adverbs are created equal when it comes to repetition. Adverbs like very, truly, absolutely work well.
Okay.
Because they intensify the meaning of the adjective or verb they modify.
That makes sense. It's like you're dialing up the intensity of your expression.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the guide also mentions repeating adverbs like again and again for dramatic effect. Phrases like, I told him again and again, or I tried and tried, add a sense of frustration or persistence to your narrative. Ah, I see. So it's not just about emphasizing individual words. It's about using repetition to create a particular effect.
You've got it.
Yeah.
It's all about using language strategically to achieve the desired impact.
All right, I'm ready to dive into something that I've never consciously noticed before.
Okay.
Binomial phrases.
Binomial phrases.
Can you explain what these are and why they're important for sounding more native-like?
Binomial phrases are those fixed expressions that consist of two words joined by a conjunction, usually, and they're incredibly common in everyday English, and add a touch of colloquialism and rhythm to our speech.
The guide gives examples like safe and sound, odds and ends, and more or less.
They're everywhere once you start listening for them. And they can be a great way to make your English sound more natural and idiomatic.
I'll definitely be paying more attention to these from now on.
Yeah.
I'm curious, though, why are these binomial phrases so prevalent in English?
It's a fascinating question. Some linguists believe that binomials have a rhythmic quality that makes them memorable and pleasing to the ear. Others suggest that they reflect a deep-seated human tendency to think in pairs and opposites.
That's interesting. So it's not just about sounding more native-like.
Right.
It's about tapping into something fundamental about how humans use language.
You're exactly right. It's
Yeah.
about understanding the deep structure of language and how it reflects our cognitive processes.
Okay, we're on to the last tip in this section of the guide.
Okay.
And it's a big one. Cleft sentences.
Cleft sentences.
I'll admit, this is a grammatical structure that I've always found a bit intimidating.
Cleft sentences can seem complex at first glance.
Right.
But they're actually a very effective way to emphasize specific information within a sentence.
Okay.
They allow us to shift the focus and draw attention to the most important element.
So instead of saying, I want to visit Italy someday, I
Yeah.
could say, one place I really want to visit someday is Italy.
Exactly.
Okay.
You've clefted the sentence, creating a separate clause to highlight Italy as the most important element.
Okay.
And the guide provides a handy formula for constructing cleft sentences.
Okay.
A starter phrase like one thing, the reason, or what, followed by a noun phrase and a be clause.
That's helpful. But I'm curious, are there different types of cleft sentences, and how do they differ in terms of their effect?
You're asking great questions. Yes, there are different types of cleft sentences,
Okay.
and they can be used to emphasize different parts of a sentence.
Okay.
We can use it clefts to emphasize the subject, object, or even adverbial phrases. For instance, we could say, it was John who broke the vase, emphasizing that it was John, not someone else.
Right.
Or we could say, it was yesterday that I saw her, emphasizing the time.
This is blowing my mind. It's like cleft sentences give us this amazing power to manipulate the focus and flow of information.
You're exactly right. They're a powerful tool for adding emphasis and nuance to our spoken English. And the more we understand how they work, the more effectively we can use them to shape our message and engage our listeners.
I'm feeling so inspired. This deep dive has opened my eyes to a whole new world of possibilities within the English language.
And this is just the beginning. As you continue to explore and experiment with these tips, your spoken English will become more and more fluent, confident, and expressive.
I can't wait to put these tips into practice, but before we get too carried away, let's take a break and come back to recap what we've learned so far.
All right.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, and I want to make sure we've absorbed all these valuable insights. Stay tuned.
It truly is remarkable how many layers there are to spoken language, isn't it?
You said it. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. But even these first few tips have given me so much to think about. It's like I've been speaking English in black and white, and now I'm seeing the whole spectrum of colors.
That's a wonderful way to put it. And that's what this guide is all about. Helping you unlock those hidden nuances and bring more vibrancy to your spoken English.
Okay, before we dive into the next set of tips, let's take a moment to recap what we've learned so far.
Okay.
We started by exploring the importance of informal greetings, those little phrases that signal camaraderie and set a relaxed tone.
And we talked about how to soften advice and suggestions by using phrases like, how about, and it might be worth, instead of relying on those more forceful should and must constructions.
Right. It's all about finding that balance between being helpful and being bossy. And then we explored the power of what? Statements. Those emotionally charged expressions that add a punch of drama or excitement to our language.
We also delved into the subtle art of it statements, those seemingly simple constructions that allow us to express feelings and opinions in a more objective and understated way.
And let's not forget about softeners, those linguistic shock absorbers that help us deliver criticism without coming across as harsh or judgmental.
We also unpacked the mystery of tag questions. Those little additions at the end of sentences that serve a variety of purposes, from checking understanding to keeping the conversation flowing.
And we even ventured into the world of shortened questions, those streamlined forms that add a touch of casualness to our conversations.
We also explored the art of using so-then questions, a subtle but effective way to make our inquiries sound softer and less intrusive.
And then, of course, we tackled that counterintuitive tip, ditching yes and no in favor of more elaborate responses that show engagement and provide context.
We also emphasized the importance of contractions,
Right.
those streamlined forms that are a hallmark of fluent and natural-sounding English.
And we even dipped our toes into the world of informal contractions like gonna, wanna, and gotta, those markers of casual conversation that can add a touch of authenticity, but only in the right setting.
We then moved on to the strategic use of pronouns, those little words that help us avoid repetition and make our speech flow more smoothly.
And we even explored the nuances of shortening past modals, those conversational shortcuts that reflect the rhythm and speed of spoken English.
We also talked about the surprising role of filler words, those little pauses and interjections that can actually make us sound more natural and approachable, as long as we use them sparingly.
And we even ventured into the world of sentence finishers, those casual phrases that can add a touch of informality and loosen up our language, again, in the right context.
We then tackled the essential but often challenging topic of linking words, those connectors that help us create a smooth flow of ideas and make our explanations more coherent.
And we even dared to explore the realm of noun phrases, those sophisticated constructions that allow us to pack more information into a sentence without sacrificing clarity.
We then embraced the art of exaggeration,
Right.
adding a dash of drama and humor to our language with those vibrant adjectives and adverbs.
And we even discovered the power of repeating adverbs, a subtle but effective technique for intensifying meaning and adding emotional weight to our statements.
We then unearthed those hidden gems of spoken English, binomial phrases, those fixed expressions that add a touch of colloquialism and rhythm to our speech.
And finally, we confronted the seemingly daunting but ultimately empowering world of cleft sentences. Those grammatical structures that allow us to shift focus and emphasize key information within a sentence.
That was quite a whirlwind tour.
It was.
And I'm curious, what are some of the things that have stood out to you so far?
Well, I have to admit, I'm fascinated by those what statements. I never realized how much power they have to convey emotion and add drama to our language. I'm definitely going to be experimenting with those more.
That's wonderful. It's all about expanding our linguistic toolkit and finding the tools that resonate with us.
What about you? Are there any tips that have particularly caught your attention?
I'm really intrigued by the idea of using "so then" questions. It's such a subtle technique,
Yeah.
but I can see how it could make a big difference in how my questions are received.
Right.
I think it could help me come across as more approachable and less interrogative.
I think that's a great observation. It's those subtle nuances that can often have the biggest impact on our communication. And I'm curious, what about our listener? What tips have resonated with you? What are you eager to try out?
Yes, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. But before we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
We've been talking a lot about sounding more native-like,
Right.
but do you think it's important to completely erase our accents? I mean, aren't our accents part of what makes us unique?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that often sparks debate among language learners and teachers. I believe that accents are a beautiful part of our linguistic identity. They reflect our backgrounds, our cultures, and our personal journeys with the language.
I completely agree. Our accents are part of our stories.
Right.
They tell the world where we come from and what we've experienced.
Exactly. And while it's perfectly fine to want to improve our pronunciation and clarity, I don't think it's necessary or even desirable to completely eliminate our accents.
So it's about finding that balance between clarity and authenticity. We want to be understood,
Right.
but we also want to embrace our unique voices.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. It's about finding that sweet spot where we can communicate effectively while still celebrating our linguistic diversity.
This conversation has been so insightful. I'm feeling more confident and excited about my English learning journey than ever before.
That's wonderful to hear.
And remember, the key is to keep practicing, keep experimenting, and most importantly, keep having fun with the language.
Okay, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. We've covered a lot of ground, from greetings to grammar to stylistic flourishes, and it's all about taking our spoken English to that next level, beyond textbook phrases and into the realm of authentic communication.
It's about becoming more aware of those subtle cues and cultural nuances that shape how native speakers actually use the language.
And it's about embracing our own voices, accents and all, while striving for clarity, fluency, and confidence.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between precision and spontaneity, between grammar and personality.
This deep dive has been such a fantastic reminder that speaking English like a native isn't about erasing who we are. It's about enriching how we express ourselves.
Beautifully said. And as we continue on this journey, I'm confident that your English will blossom in ways you never imagined.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back to wrap up our deep dive into 21 ways to speak English more like a native. Stay tuned for some final thoughts and a challenge that will help you put all these amazing tips into action. Welcome back to our deep dive into 21 ways to speak English more like a native. I'm feeling energized and ready to explore the final stretch of this fascinating guide.
Me too. It's been such a rewarding journey so far, uncovering all these subtle strategies that native speakers use to make their English sound so effortless and engaging.
I'm especially excited about the tips we've discussed around using more vivid language and expressing ourselves with more confidence. It's like we've been given a toolbox filled with linguistic gadgets, and now we get to put them to work.
I love that analogy.
Hey.
And as we wrap up our deep dive, I'd love to hear from our listener. What tips have you been particularly drawn to? Which ones are you most eager to try out in your own conversations?
Yes, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your insights and experiences in the comments below. But for now, let's shift our focus to a crucial aspect of fluency that often gets overlooked: the importance of simply enjoying the process.
You're absolutely right. Learning a language shouldn't feel like a chore. It should be an adventure, a journey of discovery, a chance to play with words and connect with others in a meaningful way.
I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the rules and the grammar that we forget to simply have fun with the language.
It's like anything else we learn. If we approach it with a sense of joy and curiosity, we're more likely to make progress and stick with it.
This guide has been such a fantastic reminder of that. It's not just about memorizing phrases or mastering grammatical structures. It's about developing a feel for the language, an intuitive sense of how it flows and how it's used in real-life situations.
And that intuition comes from practice, from immersing ourselves in the language, from listening to native speakers, from trying out new phrases and expressions, even if we make mistakes along the way.
I think that's a really important point. We need to give ourselves permission to experiment, to stumble, to laugh at our mistakes, and to learn from them.
Exactly. It's all part of the process. And as we become more comfortable with making mistakes, we become less afraid to speak up, to express ourselves, and to connect with others.
This whole conversation has been so inspiring. I feel like I've been given a new lease on my English learning journey. I'm eager to put all these tips into practice and see how they transform my communication.
That's fantastic. And as you embark on this next stage of your journey, I want to leave you with one final piece of advice. Embrace your individuality.
That's such an important reminder. We've talked about how to sound more native-like, but ultimately the goal is to find our own voice within the language.
Exactly. Don't try to be a carbon copy of someone else. Embrace your own unique style, your own rhythm, your own way of expressing yourself.
Our accents, our experiences, our personalities, all these things contribute to the richness and diversity of the English language.
And that's what makes it so beautiful. It's a constantly evolving tapestry, woven together by the voices of millions of people from all over the world.
I love that image. It's a reminder that English is not a monolithic entity. It's a vibrant and ever-changing mosaic of cultures, perspectives, and experiences.
And as we continue to explore and embrace this diversity, our own English will become richer, more nuanced, and more authentically our own.
Well said. This deep dive has been such an incredible journey. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of not just how to speak English more fluently, but also how to use it in a way that feels both natural and personally meaningful.
I'm so glad to hear that. And as we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a challenge. Choose one tip from this guide that really resonated with you and commit to trying it out in your next conversation.
That's a great challenge. Whether it's using a more informal greeting, incorporating a softener, or experimenting with a cleft sentence, pick one thing and give it a go.
And don't be afraid to have fun with it. The more you play with the language, the more comfortable and confident you'll become.
And who knows, you might even inspire someone else to embark on their own language learning adventure.
That would be wonderful. After all, language is all about connection, isn't it? It's about bridging the gaps between us and creating a more understanding and compassionate world.
On that beautiful note, we've reached the end of our deep dive. I hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as we have. And remember, fluency isn't a destination, it's a lifelong adventure. So keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep having fun with the amazing gift of language.